Welcome to another tutorial about Compose Material Design 3 buttons. So here in this tutorial we will dive into the world of buttons, and we will provide you the hands-on tutorial about implementing all the different types of buttons. So what is buttons? So by using buttons we effectively we can create more engaging and user-friendly experience for taking actions and making choices with a tap of the button. Okay, so we will be understanding buttons. We will be implementing different types of buttons like field buttons, elevated buttons, field tonal button, outline button, text button, icon button, segmented button, like a multiple segment choice segmented button and single choice segmented button, floating accent button, and extended floating accent button. And then we will also be learning more about different guidelines, specification and accessibility principles while using the buttons. Okay, so okay, so let's begin. And first question that we have to answer is, what are buttons? So buttons are interactive UI components that allows users to trigger actions within your applications. So they are essential for providing a clear and intuitive way for users to interact with your app and perform tasks. So you can think buttons as the primary way that users tell your application to do something whenever you click the button, right? So it's like submitting a form. For example, like whenever you click, you submit a form, or you navigate to a different screen, or you make a selection, or a button provides a visual cue and a mechanism for users to interact with this action. Okay, so this is the basic fundamental principles that you need to understand about the core concepts of buttons. So there are different types of buttons, as I told you. So we have a field button, we have a elevated button, we have a field tonal button, we have outline button, we have a text button, icon button, multiple choice segmented button, single choice segmented button, floating accent button, and an extended floating accent button. So we will be step by step understanding try to understand different types of button, and we will try to implement different types of button in this tutorial. So first thing is the let's talk about the field button. So a field button is a solid button, as you can see here. Okay, let me just zoom it. So this is a field button. Okay, so this field button is a solid button within a background with a background color. Okay, so used for primary actions within a screen or section. Then you have a elevated button. So this elevated button is a raised button that stands out from the background, used for important actions that shouldn't be accidentally triggered. Okay, so then you have a field tonal button. So this button with a less prominent background color are used for secondary actions that are still important but not the primary focus. And then you have a outline button with a border but no background field, as you can see here, are used for less prominent action or to conserve visual space. Okay, so then you have a text button. So this text button with only text, as you can see here, no background, no nothing, no borders, no backgrounds. So they are used for minimal emphasis and or like visual space is limited, or when there is a visual space is very limited. Okay, so then you have a icon button. As you can see here, this is a simple icon of a heart, and this button are used for are ideally used with a they are ideal for actions with a clear visual representation, like a play, pause, search, like for example a music player application have a play, pause, search buttons. Those are icon buttons. Then you have a different segmented buttons. These segmented buttons are actually a group of buttons where only one actions can be selected or multiple actions can be selected consecutively. Okay, so they are also used for for this group of selection. As you can see here, you can have a multiple choice or you can have a single choice here. Okay, then you have a floating accent button. That's a circular button, as you can see here, that stands out for the UI used for primary accents within a screen. And then you have an extended floating accent button, which is pretty much extended version of the simple floating accent button that provides more context and clarity for the accent. Okay, so step by step we will be going out to the understanding the implementation of floating accent, like different buttons. Okay, so this is a pretty simple preview of like a first thing is like, okay, let me show you. Okay, so we have a pretty much simple field button. Okay, so the implementation is pretty simple. We are using the compose material 3 button, this composables, to create the field button. Okay, so you can check it out here. We are using the material 3 library. So a button has all these parameters, like clicking is called when the button is clicked. You have a modifier, the parameter where the modifiers can be applied to this button. There is enabled version, like you controls the enabled state of the button. When it's false, the components will not respond to user input, and it will appear visually disabled and disabled to accessibility service also. Then you have a shape that defines the different shapes of this button container, like a border when border is not null, and so shadows when using elevation. Okay, so you can have different colors for the button colors. You can use the button color default colors. You can have elevation that is used to resolve the elevation of the button in different states. This controls the size of the shadow below the button. Additionally, when the container color is your surface color, this controls the amount of primary color applied as an overlay. Okay, and then you have a border of a button. The border is to draw around the container of this button. Then you have a content padding, a spacing value that applies internally when the container of the content. Then you have an interaction source representing the stream of interactions for this button. You can create and pass in your own remember the instance to observe the interaction and customize the appearance or behavior of the button in different states. Okay, so this is the composables. Then we just use this simple field button. As you can see here, this is the overview. And then we also have elevated button. This is it, the elevated button, the code, the implementation. Then you have the field tonal button here. This is the implementation. We are using the standard compose from the standard compose library. Okay, material 3 composables. It's pretty simple. Then this is the label. Then we have the outline button here. So this is the outline button with the border here. Then similarly we have a text button. We're using the standard composables provided by Material Design 3. Okay, and then we have the text button. Then we have an icon button. It's pretty simple, you know, just pass on the icon. And now the interesting thing is the multiple choice segmented button. So multiple choice segmented button, to implement them, we used let me just overview this multiple choice composables button. So you can see you have a multiple choices. You can just do multiple choices. And how I have implemented this multiple choice segmented button is like I have some like certain options. You know, I have option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4. Then I have a selected index. I remember this mutable state list of this selected index. Then Inside the multiple choice like segmented button, I have created a segmented button. Okay, so this is the multiple choices segmented button row. Inside the multiple choice segmented button row, you just need to pass the segmented buttons. Okay, and then the logic goes like, you have a checked state. If the selected index contains this index, then it's checked. Otherwise, unchecked change is like whenever you switch, you enable or disable the you add or remove the index from this selected indexes, right? And you just pass on the selected button default shape. Count is your size, and that's it. This is a simple implementation of multiple choice segmented button row and with the segmented buttons. And similarly, you also have a single choice segmented button, that's row, where we just provide the segmented button, and the logic is as follows. Let me just also run this single choice segmented button. But here you see you have just only one possible selection, you don't have a multiple selection. And the logic is as follows: you have the options, then you have a selected index, just have a mutual index of, you just need to set the index only once. Just check the index and select, like on click, you just set the index of that selected index. And that's it, guys. This is a simple implementation of a single choice segmented button row with the segmented buttons, right? And then similarly, we also have the floating action button here, as you can see here, which is just pretty much using the standard composables of from provided by Material 3. It's a floating action button. So simple implementation. Then you have an extended floating action button, which is also provided by our Material Design 3. It's pretty simple. And yes, so now after going through all the implementation of the different varieties of buttons, so let's understand the different let's try to understand the different states of the button. So we can have different states of the button, like enabled, disabled, hovered, focused, and pressed. So what is the enabled state? It's like the default state. The button is interactive and responds to the user clicks. That's like it's visually distinct example of vibrant color, like there is no opacity. Okay, so in the disabled state, the button is not interactive and doesn't respond to clicks. It's visually indicates inactivity, that is grayed out or reduce opacity. So you can disable a button by setting the enabled parameter to false. Then you have a hovered state that applies to a mouse input. The mouse cursor is over the button, may have a subtle visual changes, like a slight background changes. That's the hovered state. Then you have a focus state, when the button has a keyboard focus. By tapping to it, example, focus has a visual indicator like an outline or glow. Okay, then similarly you also have a pressed state. The button is currently being pressed by the user, so usually has a distinct visual changes, that is a darker background or inner shadow. Okay, so what is the anatomy of the button? Okay, so we have gone through all the different types of button, so let's try to understand the anatomy of the button. So a button can consist of a container, content, click target, and states. So what is a container? A container of a button is the outermost area of the button that defines its shape and boundaries. So it can have a background color, border, or elevation. So whereas the content is the element within the button, such as text, icons, or both. So the content is typically centered within the container. Okay, so then you have a click target, as you can see here, this is the container content, and then you have a click targets, then the states, different states, like enable, disabled, hovered, focus, press, as I discussed earlier. Okay, so this states actually provides the visual feedback of the user. And okay, so now let's also talk about the accessibility principles that you need to follow when you implement the button. Is like you need to provide a meaningful content description for the icons used in icon buttons, and icon buttons, and also extended floating action buttons. So this will allow screen readers to convey the button's purpose to visually impaired users. Okay, so even if an icons is purely decorative, use null for the content description to indicate it can be ignored by assistive technologies like a talkback. Okay, so if it is decorative, then just pass null to the content description. That's the concept. So you can also clear and concise use clear and concise labels, like use button text that clearly and concisely describes the action the button the button performs. Okay, so avoid this will avoid the overlay technical or jargon, or overly technical terms. Okay, so you can also touch target sizes. You can also have for the touch target sizes, you can ensure the buttons have a sufficient large touch target sizes to make them easy to tap, especially on smaller screens. So the minimum recommended touch target size is 48 dp. And so use sufficient color contrast between the button text icons and the background to ensure accessibility for users with flow vision. And then you also ensure buttons are included in the natural tab order and provide clear visual feedbacks when focused. So this helps users navigate using a keyboard. And then finally, provide a clear visual and non-visual feedbacks for different button states, like enabled, disabled, pressed, etc., to indicate interactivity to all users. So this is all about buttons, guys, and catch you up in the next lecture.